Good morning, afternoon, players, gamers, and critters. My name is Master Mimic, and welcome to the first episode of Roaring D20s, a show where I just sit here talking to a microphone about everything to do with Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop gaming in general, and just give you my opinion on things. Sometimes I might want to give advice, or at least my advice, towards certain things that might be, hassling players or GMs, or I might be giving my own perspective on a piece of D&D culture, or even something like story time. Maybe horror stories about my time at the gaming table. So this is basically a way for me, and by extension you guys, to get away from all the problems, on the news, on Instagram and Facebook. Sometimes it might be good just to shut those off, sit here and listen to my golden vocals as I talk about my various interests and stuff like that. So let's get started on today's subject, which is basically, simply put, introductions. Appropriate, right? Old Master Mimic began life in D&D probably back in 2015. So about 15 years I've been playing this game, both as a player and as a GM, although more recently I've been more of a GM than a player. That's kind of what happens when you have the most experience in your group, and people within that group don't quite have enough experience to run a lot of games their own. I mean, I probably have run more adventures than I have playing adventures. Let's see. Well, my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons, I had a friend that I've known since junior high. He asked me if I wanted to come over and play with them, and it's the standard way that a lot of people get into Dungeons and Dragons. You just don't know how to play it, but you're always interested. So it was one of those Friday nights where I had nothing going on. I mean, understand, I was not the cool kid in high school. I mean, I tended to know just about everybody, and I was associated with a lot of cliques, even if I wasn't a full member. But all in all, I was always a nerd. I was always a geek, whichever you go by. But yeah, so my fellow nerdy friend asked me if I wanted to partake, and I said sure. I remember my first character was a half-elf fighter named Wilhelm, or Will for short. This was brought about because I had I had just watched Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie, and so Will Turner was in my head, and that kind of image was there. So I went with that, and to be perfectly honest, I don't remember a whole lot of the first adventure. I know we were fighting some skeletons, and because I was the fighter, I was the one at the front line, fighting these bags of bones with blade and vigor and wit, and it was fun. I really liked it. I remember I actually had to borrow someone else's dice because I, again, back in high school, didn't have a lot of money, and I wasn't one of those kids who had an allowance. Honestly, I don't get how kids have allowances. I don't know. I mean, for me, sorry, I'm going off subject. But anyway, so I had to borrow someone else's dice, and I remember that night I was having pretty bad rolls. And when you're first starting off in D&D, that's not what you want. Especially when everybody's relying on you, because you're on the front lines. And I just remember these skeletons were starting to trash me. And it took, I'll call him Rage. It took Rage running over with his barbarian and helping me that helped us turn the tide, because I forget what he was doing. I want to say there was a door we were trying to get through, but it was booby trapped, and he was trying to strong arm it open. Barbarians. We were young and naive. We didn't understand that barbarians could be more than big, brutish muscle heads with little brains. So he was trying to get this door open. Again, I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's what I'll go with. So he's trying to get this door open, and hey, Will, take care of these skeletons. Except, I think we were level like 2 or 3, and when you have a bunch of level 1 skeletons swarming you, well, that quickly turns out of your favor. So he rushes over, he saves me, and that was the moment I developed kind of I still have it even today, a superstition against using other people's dice. And this extends to other people too. I mean, if we get people into the group, like if we get new players, I will heavily suggest they buy their own dice rather than using ours, because every single time I've had somebody use our dice or use someone else's dice, it's always been really, really, really bad. And I know this because, okay, little note, I know everybody has, quote, their favorite dice, or die if we're being more exclusive. But mine is a clear golden dice that I called Ajax, yes, after the dish soap. And yes, that was inspired by Deadpool. Those who got that reference, you get an inspiration point. Yay! Sorry. Anyway, so Ajax has got me through a lot of bad situations. I mean, we're talking back against the wall, my HP down to the single digits, my weapons mostly ineffective. I have this one last roll, some situation that if I fudge this, it's over. I lose that character. I gotta re-roll, or at least wait for a lengthy resurrection side quest, And then I roll Ajax, and boom, there's a natural 20. The day is saved, thanks to Ajax. So, one time, I think it was my little sister. Yes, I even was able to get my little sister play D&D with me and my friends. She was... Obviously, she was a little short with dice, because she's never played before. So, being the good older brother that I am, I lent her my D20, my beloved Ajax, and a few other dice, obviously. But Ajax is what is the most important in the story. And she, despite that, the superstition, the curse of the used dice, struck. Even Ajax, this miraculous die that had saved my characters more times than I cared to remember. Ajax couldn't roll above, I think it was a 12. It was bad. And that is why, to this day, I still have that superstition against using other people's die. And it all goes back to that one character, Wilhelm, the half-elf fighter, who was having the worst time fighting starter-level enemies. Let's see. So obviously that was my first introduction to D&D, and I didn't have a great time. As South Park says, I had a pretty bad time. So I didn't want to go back. I forget what it was. I wonder if it's the same guy. But like the same player or whatever. But I remember Rage contacted me again saying that they were going to be running a different game. And that game was Pathfinder. Obviously, first edition. He said that Pathfinder was a lot simpler, more combat focused, and they were going to be running again. They wanted to know if I wanted to join. Well, I guess here's a quick side note. The game we had been playing was 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. and I recall, I believe that's the edition a lot of people have problems with. And we were having a lot, like, I even remember even the DM was having a lot of troubles with the game. But I think that's less to do with the actual book or the, Dungeons and Dragons and the edition it is. But whatever. What I'm trying to get at is we eventually went over to Pathfinder, and I made a barbarian this time because I didn't. I guess you could say I didn't want a fighter character who had to think. I kind of wanted to just be the big tough guy who can eat a lot of damage and eat a lot of enemies. So I made a barbarian. I think he started off as a human, but I was able to get the GM's permission to have him be a werewolf. But it was a natural affliction. It wasn't a curse. Your wolf man turning whenever you want. This was or not turn whenever you want, but turn during every full moon. But it was I could turn whenever I wanted. The idea was, though, is if I used it out of combat, every hour I had it out, I would have to roll a Constitution save, I think it was, in order to keep from being fatigued. And if I used it in combat while in a rage, the amount of rounds I could rage was halved, and the amount of rounds I was fatigued afterwards was doubled. And it was a good system. I really liked it, and this ended up being one of my favorite characters. His name was Drovrik Noarin. His character, after a while, after this game, developed a lot more. I remember he was kind of an asshole. He was very, what's the term? He was very headstrong, which is, that's a barbarian. Yeah, that's not special. But no, this guy was ruthless. I remember we had the quest was we were helping these villagers who were saying that these bird people, I forget the name they gave them, but I remember they were a homebrew race they made. But these bird people, these bird persons, were attacking their caravans and blocking off their trade routes, and they needed us to clear them out. My character, Drovrik's first, I remember my first thought, just because of the way that I made this character, was just to burn the forest down. The forest where these bird people were hiding, just burn it all down. Obviously, every other person in my party was no, let's not do that. Especially when I said this in front of the quest giver, and the guy was looking at me like, "What? Oh God, I made a mistake here." And this was the moment I remember I first heard the term "murder hobo." Yeah, the GM accused me of being a murder hobo, and I looked at him thinking, "What the hell is that?" He said, "Oh, it's a character that goes from place to place murdering everybody in sight." And I said, "But I'm not doing that. My character is not that bright. So he wants to burn things. If, that's his way of doing an area of effect ability. Just burn it until, nothing is left but ashes." Yeah, me and this GM didn't really, funny enough, even though he was the one who invited me, I remember he and I didn't really get along a whole lot at the table. But that's a story for another day. But anyway, so I had a lot of fun with Drovrik, and most importantly, I had a lot of fun with Pathfinder. I know people out there, not everybody agrees that Pathfinder is a good game. People call it Mathfinder because there is a lot of math involved. But the thing was, what I like about Pathfinder, even with its imbalances, even with the small problems, Like, for example, why have wizards? Why make it essential for wizards to use material components for spells if there is literally a feat that has no prerequisites whatsoever called Askew Materials that allows them to completely surpass that? It it's almost like if you want to play a wizard in the most traditional sense, you are doing so purely by role playing purposes. Because it's almost like you're giving yourself that essential setback when you can just get a feat that allows you to automatically cast a spell without needing material components. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is, despite all of that, to this day, I mean, I'm looking down right now at my vast library of Pathfinder books. I have all the bestiaries. I have the core rulebook, obviously. I have the advanced guides. I love this game. And to this day, this is the game that we play the most in my group. And that is basically, let's see. I was trying to remember where I was getting at with this story. But anyway, like I said, so I had fun with this game. Had fun with Pathfinder. More so than I did with Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, granted, I have the I got the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition Essentials kit for my birthday, and that's definitely going to be something I'm going to be exploring in the future, near future. I'll let you guys know how that goes. But obviously Pathfinder's been my go-to game. Let's see. I guess that's where we'll call it. Again, thank you so much for listening, and whatever you're doing, I hope my little ramblings have been good background noise. I'll see you all in the next episode. My name is Master Mimic, and you all have a good night or afternoon. Take it easy.